I never thought I'd be the woman whose husband abandons her in the hospital, but here we are. My name is Natalie. I'm 42, and until 51 days ago, I thought I had a solid marriage. Not perfect, definitely not Instagram-worthy, but solid. Mason and I had been married for 8 years, and I became stepmom to his son Leo, who was just 8 when we first met. I really tried with that kid, taught him to bake cookies from scratch, helped him build the most impressive science fair projects, spent countless weekends at soccer games cheering from the sidelines. The whole stepmom package. Leo was reserved at first, but over time, we developed our own special bond. I thought we were good, you know? Mason and I weren't exactly relationship goals, but we had our routine. We had our inside jokes. We had date nights every other Friday and lazy Sunday mornings with pancakes. We had a life together. At least that's what I believed. It all changed 51 days ago. I was working at my construction management job, overseeing a renovation project downtown. I've always been careful on site. Safety first has been my mantra for 15 years in this business. But sometimes, no matter how careful you are, things go wrong. A support beam that had supposedly been secured gave way without warning. The official report later called it a catastrophic structural failure. All I remember is the deafening crack, then looking up to see 2 tons of steel and concrete coming down. I tried to run, but there wasn't time. I woke up in the ICU with a crushed leg, 3 broken ribs, and a punctured lung. The doctors later told me I was lucky to be alive. Not feeling particularly lucky these days, to be honest. That first night in the hospital is still fuzzy. The pain meds had me floating in and out of consciousness. I remember calling Mason, telling him not to bring Leo because it looked pretty bad. I didn't want to traumatize the kid. Mason said he'd come first thing in the morning. Morning came. No Mason. Day 2. No Mason. I figured he was dealing with Leo, maybe work stuff. I called him that evening. He answered while watching some reality show. I could hear it blaring in the background. He said he'd try to make it tomorrow. Day 3. No Mason. By day 5, I was starting to get seriously worried. Not about us, but about him. Had he been in an accident? Had something happened to Leo? I asked a nurse if my husband had called. Nothing. I tried calling again. Straight to voicemail. The pattern continued. 1 week became 2. The nurses started giving me these pitying looks. One of them, Zachary, a kind-eyed guy about 34, would sit with me during his breaks sometimes. He never asked why my husband wasn't visiting, but I could see the question in his eyes. 3 weeks in, I was finally moved from ICU to a regular room. By then, I'd managed to get Mason on the phone exactly twice. Both calls lasted less than 3 minutes. He always had somewhere to be, something to do. Our dog Baxter was sick. The dishwasher was leaking. Leo had a game. Always something. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about our 8th anniversary just 2 months ago. Mason had seemed distant, checking his phone all night. When I asked if everything was okay, he smiled and said, "Of course. Why wouldn't it be?" I remember thinking it was a weird response, but I let it go. Foreshadowing much? FML. 4 weeks in, surgery number 3 on my leg. Still no visit from Mason. My sister Violet came by almost daily, bringing actual home-cooked food and updates about Baxter. The dog was fine, by the way. One afternoon, she hesitated before leaving, then asked if I wanted her to talk to Mason. About what? I asked. The look on Violet's face said it all. My sister has never been able to hide her feelings. We grew up in a house where you said what you meant or didn't say anything at all. About the fact that he hasn't visited his wife in the hospital for 28 days, Violet finally said. Something broke inside me. Not my heart, more like the bubble of denial I'd been living in. I asked Violet to check our joint account. Call it a hunch. Call it finally waking the hell up. 2 days later, Violet brought my laptop and helped me log into our banking. What I saw made my blood pressure spike so high that a nurse came running when the monitors went crazy. $6,000 withdrawn over the past month. ATM withdrawals, mostly. a few transfers to an account I didn't recognize, and a charge from a jewelry store. Mason doesn't wear jewelry except his wedding ring, and I certainly hadn't received any gifts while lying in this hospital bed. That night, I made the call that changed everything. Mason actually picked up for once. I didn't mention the money, just asked when he was planning to visit. "Look, the hospital's like 40 minutes away," he said. I could hear him chewing something. Dinner time. "Gas is like $5 a gallon right now, and with everything else..." "Everything else?" I repeated. A pause. "Well, yeah. I'm basically a single parent right now. Leo has stuff. The house needs work. That leaky roof isn't fixing itself." I reminded him that my sister had offered to pick him up multiple times, that friends had offered to drive him, that we had more than enough money for gas. Or at least we did before he started making all those withdrawals. That's when he said it. The words I'll never forget. "You're not worth the gas money, Natalie. Either die fast or heal quick, but I'm sick of this in-between." I must have made some sound because he immediately started backpedaling, said he was stressed, said he didn't mean it, but I wasn't really hearing him anymore. Then Leo got on the phone. Guess he was right there the whole time. "We don't miss you," he said, his voice cracking like he was trying to sound tougher than he felt. "Mom's friend Penelope has been helping with everything." Penelope, our neighbor, the woman who moved in 6 months ago and was always offering to help Mason with things around the house when I was working late. I hung up, didn't say another word, just pressed the red button and stared at the ceiling for what felt like hours. Morning came. Day 36 in the hospital. Zachary brought me an extra pudding cup with my meds. "Rough night?" he asked, noticing my untouched breakfast. I told him everything, not sure why. Maybe because he was the one person who'd been consistently kind without wanting anything from me. He listened without interrupting, then said something that stuck with me. "Some people show you who they are during the good times. The smart ones pay attention. The rest of us have to learn during the bad times." The next 2 weeks were a blur of physical therapy, doctor visits, and secret planning. I told the hospital staff not to give Mason any information if he called. He didn't. I had Violet bring me documents from our home office while Mason was at work. I made some calls using Violet's phone. Meanwhile, I started tracking the bank accounts daily. More withdrawals, more unexplained expenses, a charge for 2 plane tickets to Miami. Mason hates the beach, says the sand gets everywhere. One afternoon, Violet came in looking nervous, said she'd driven by our house and seen Penelope's car in the driveway at 2 o'clock in the afternoon on a Wednesday when Mason was supposed to be at work. I didn't explode, didn't cry. Instead, I felt this strange calm settle over me, like everything finally made sense. That night, I asked Zachary what it would take for me to check myself out early. The doctors wanted me to stay another 3 weeks minimum. My leg was still in a massive brace. I could barely walk with a walker, but I needed to move before Mason emptied our accounts completely. "AMA," Zachary said, "against medical advice. But Natalie, you're still healing. The infection risk alone..." "I can't stay here," I told him. "Not anymore." He helped me understand what I'd need for home care, helped me find a medical supply company that would deliver equipment, even gave me the number of a home health service. Day 51, I signed the AMA papers. My doctor spent 30 minutes trying to talk me out of it, said I was risking serious complications. I told him I'd risk more by staying. Violet picked me up in her SUV, had the back seats folded down so I could keep my leg elevated. As we pulled away from the hospital, she asked the obvious question, "Where to?" I watched the hospital disappear in the side mirror. 51 days. Not one visit from my husband. "Not home," I said. "Take me to the stay bridge on Wesley. I made a reservation. Extended stay." For how long? I thought about Mason and Leo and Penelope, about the missing money and the beach trip, about 8 years of building a life with someone who couldn't be bothered to visit me in the hospital. "As long as it takes," I said. "I've got plans to make." Violet glanced at me, then back at the road. "You're going nuclear, aren't you?" For the first time in 51 days, I smiled. "No, I'm going to give Mason exactly what he deserves. Nothing more, nothing less." And that's how Operation Empty House began. The first night at the Staybridge was rough. The hotel room seemed massive and empty compared to my hospital room. No nurses checking vitals every 4 hours. No beeping machines. Just me, my thoughts, and a leg that felt like it was being stabbed repeatedly. I ended up binging some cooking competition show until 4:00 a.m. because the pain meds weren't cutting it. Violet brought me breakfast the next morning, those little microwavable breakfast sandwiches and the strongest coffee known to mankind. Found her scrolling through comments on a neighborhood social media group. That's when I learned Mason had posted about his heroic wife fighting for her life and asking for prayers during this difficult time, complete with a 5-year-old picture of us on vacation. The timestamp showed he'd posted it 3 days after my accident and never mentioned me again. The absolute gall of this man. Violet wanted me to call Mason immediately, tell him I knew everything, go scorched earth on social media. Part of me wanted that too, the messy public meltdown where everyone would see what he'd done. But something Zachary said at the hospital kept echoing in my head. The best revenge isn't just planned, it's patient. I spent the next 3 days in that hotel room making lists, taking notes, and making phone calls. Violet brought me a whiteboard from her classroom. She teaches 4th grade, and I mapped out everything I needed to do. I called it Operation Empty House, because that's exactly what Mason would come home to when I was done. First call, Sophia Mendez, the divorce attorney who helped my colleague Jen through her nightmare divorce last year. Sophia agreed to meet me at the hotel since I was still barely mobile. She arrived the next morning with a leather portfolio and eyes that missed nothing. After hearing my story, she didn't offer sympathy, she offered strategy. Georgia is an equitable distribution state, she explained. That doesn't mean 50-50. It means fair division based on circumstances. Your husband abandoning you during a medical crisis and potentially having an affair? That's circumstances. And we went through everything. The joint accounts, the house, in both our names, my retirement accounts, significantly larger than Mason's, and the evidence of his withdrawals and spending. What about Leo? I asked. He's not my biological son, but... Sophia's expression softened slightly. Step-parents have limited rights in Georgia. But if you want to maintain a relationship, we can work on that. I did want that. Despite everything, I loved that kid. The plan took shape over the next week. I needed documentation of everything. Bank statements, text messages, medical records showing Mason never visited. Sophia suggested hiring a private investigator to document the affair, but I had a different idea. I don't need to prove he's sleeping with Penelope, I said. I just need to prove he abandoned me and is draining our accounts. Violet helped me set up new bank accounts at a different bank. I transferred half of our savings, less than half actually because I'm not a monster, into my new account. Left enough to cover bills and then some. Mason wouldn't notice until he tried to make another big withdrawal. Next, I called our insurance company, changed the passwords, requested copies of all policies. Found out Mason had reduced my life insurance coverage 3 months ago. Interesting timing. Then came the physical part of the plan. This required help. Violet recruited her husband James and their son Tyler. I hired 2 movers from a company that specialized in discreet relocations. Apparently, there's a whole industry for people leaving bad situations. I made a detailed inventory of everything in our house that was mine before the marriage. Everything I'd bought with my own money during the marriage. Everything that had sentimental value to me. I was meticulous, including photos and, when possible, receipts. I learned from Sophia that Mason and Leo were planning a weekend trip to his brother's lake house. Probably the same weekend he'd planned to be in Miami with Penelope before my accident disrupted things. This was our window. The Friday they left, Operation Empty House went into action. Violet drove me to Mason's house. Using my key, we entered what had been my home for 8 years. It felt strange being there, like walking through a museum of a life I used to have. Photos of the 3 of us on the walls, my coffee mug still in the dish rack. Baxter came bounding up, nearly knocking me over with my walker. At least, someone missed me. The movers arrived at 10 a.m. sharp. I sat in a chair in the living room, directing traffic as they carefully packed my belongings. My clothes, my books, my grandmother's china, my home office equipment, the antique desk I'd restored myself, the painting I bought on our trip to Santa Fe. I left all the furniture we'd bought together, left the TV, left the kitchen appliances. I wasn't trying to strip the house bare. I just wanted what was rightfully mine. In the master bedroom, I found evidence of Penelope everywhere. Her perfume on a pillow, a pair of earrings on the nightstand, a toothbrush in my bathroom. I took photos of everything. In Leo's room, I hesitated. Then I left the signed baseball I'd gotten him for his birthday on his bed with a note. "This is still yours. So is my love. Call me when you're ready. Natalie." By 4 p.m., the movers had loaded everything into their truck. I had them take it all to a storage unit I'd rented. I wasn't ready to settle somewhere new yet. Before leaving, I did 3 things. 1, left my house key and wedding ring on the kitchen counter. 2, took Baxter and his supplies. Mason had never wanted the dog anyway. 3, left a copy of my hospital records on the table, with every day Mason hadn't visited highlighted in yellow, no dramatic note. No explanation, just evidence of 51 days of abandonment and the conspicuous absence of everything that was mine. As Violet drove me away, Baxter sitting happily in the back seat, I felt lighter than I had in months, maybe years. "You okay?" Violet asked. I looked back at the house one last time. "No," I said honestly, "but I will be." Now all that was left was to wait for Mason to come home to his half-empty house and realize what he'd lost. The first call came at 6:37 p.m. on Sunday. I was back at the Staybridge, my leg propped up on pillows, Baxter snoring beside me. I watched Mason's name flash on my phone screen and let it ring through to voicemail. He called again and again. Then the texts started. "Where are you? Where's all your stuff? What the hell, Natalie? Answer your damn phone!" I took screenshots of everything. Sophia had advised me to document all communication. Around 8 p.m. he sent, "You took the dog? Seriously? Leo is devastated." That one almost got me, almost made me pick up. But then I remembered Leo's words. "We don't miss you." I remembered 51 days without a visit. At 9:12 p.m., a different text came through. From Leo's phone. "Dad is really mad. Did you leave us?" My heart cracked. I typed back, "I didn't leave you, Leo. I left a situation that wasn't good for me anymore. I love you, and I'm here whenever you want to talk." No response. Monday morning, I had a follow-up appointment with my orthopedic surgeon. The news wasn't great. The early discharge had indeed set back my recovery. I'd need another surgery in a few weeks, more physical therapy, more time before I could return to work. As I was leaving the clinic, I saw him, Mason, standing by the entrance, scanning the faces of everyone who walked out. I froze, but it was too late. Our eyes locked. He looked terrible, unshaven, hair a mess, still wearing the same Georgia Bulldog sweatshirt he'd had for years, the one with the hole in the left elbow. "Natalie," he said, walking toward me. "Jesus Christ, what are you doing?" I gripped my walker tighter. "Getting my leg checked. Doctor says I'm healing slower than expected. Probably because I had to leave the hospital early." His face flushed. "You know what I mean. You emptied the house. You took Baxter. You're not answering my calls. And you didn't visit me in the hospital for 51 days. We all make choices, Mason." A woman leaving the clinic slowed down, clearly eavesdropping. Mason noticed and lowered his voice. "Can we talk somewhere private? Please?" I considered saying no, considered telling him to talk to my lawyer. But part of me needed this confrontation, needed to see his face when I told him exactly what I thought of him. "Fine. There's a coffee shop next door." The walk was excruciating. My leg throbbed with every step. Mason didn't offer to help. Didn't comment on my walker or my obvious pain. Just walked slightly ahead, holding the door open with an impatient expression. We found a table in the corner. I ordered a latte. He got nothing. Just sat there, staring at me like I was a math problem he couldn't solve. "How did you find me?" I asked. "Your sister's husband mentioned you had an appointment today. I figured it would be here since this is where they referred you from the hospital. Mental note, tell James to stop talking to Mason." "So," I said, wrapping my hands around my mug, "you wanted to talk. Talk." He ran a hand through his hair. "What's going on with you? You disappear from the house, take half our stuff, kidnap the dog." "Kidnap? That's rich. You haven't fed that dog once in 3 years. And you're not answering my calls. Are you having some kind of breakdown? Is this because of the accident?" I stared at him, truly seeing him for the first time in years. This man who could twist anything to make himself the victim, who could abandon his wife in the hospital and then act confused when there were consequences. "No breakdown," I said calmly. "Just clarity. 51 days in the hospital, Mason. Not one visit from you. Not one. While you were busy withdrawing cash, buying jewelry for Penelope, and planning trips to Miami." His eyes widened slightly at the specifics. "You're checking our bank accounts? Invading my privacy?" "Our joint accounts. And yes, I noticed the money disappearing, just like I noticed Penelope's toothbrush in my bathroom, her earrings on my nightstand." He had the audacity to look offended. "So you're spying on me? Going through my things? That's why you're doing all this? Because you're jealous?" I laughed. Actually laughed out loud. "Jealous? No, Mason. I'm done. I've filed for divorce." The word landed like a slap. He blinked rapidly. "Divorce? Over what? A few missed hospital visits? I was taking care of Leo, while sleeping with Penelope in our bed. She's just a friend who's been helping out. Save it for someone who hasn't seen her underwear in your laundry basket." His face darkened. "You're making a mistake, Natalie, a huge mistake. I was going to come visit. Things just got busy." "Too busy for your wife who almost died? Who's still recovering from 3 surgeries? Who needed you?" "You've always been so dramatic," he said, shaking his head. "This is exactly why I needed space. Everything's always a crisis with you." I felt something shift inside me. The last tiny piece of love I had for this man disintegrated. "I want you to listen carefully," I said, leaning forward. "I don't want you back. I don't want explanations or excuses. The divorce papers have been filed. My lawyer will contact yours. Until then, stay away from me." I stood up, steadying myself on the walker. "One more thing," I added. "Tell Leo I love him and I'm here when he's ready to talk. Unlike you, I don't abandon the people I care about." Mason's face contorted with anger. "You think you can just walk away? After everything I've done for you? You were nothing before me, a workaholic with no life. I gave you a family." People were staring now. I didn't care. "And I gave you 8 years of my life," I said quietly. "Consider us even." I walked out, each step painful but necessary. Through the window, I saw him still sitting there, staring at nothing, looking lost. Good, I thought. Let him feel a fraction of what I felt in that hospital bed, waiting for someone who was never going to come. 3 months after Operation Empty House, I moved into my new apartment. 2nd floor, with an elevator, thank God, 2 bedrooms, and a small balcony overlooking a park. Baxter loved watching the squirrels from his new perch. The divorce proceedings were moving along, though Mason was fighting me on everything. Sophia said that was typical. The guilty parties often put up the biggest fights. He'd hired some aggressive attorney who kept sending threatening letters about emotional abandonment and marital assets. Sophia just laughed and filed the appropriate responses. My leg was healing, finally. The 2nd surgery had gone better than expected. I could walk with a cane now instead of a walker, and physical therapy was only 3 times a week instead of 5. Small victories. Work had been surprisingly supportive. My boss, Janet, had arranged for me to work remotely part-time while I recovered. My team sent me a ridiculous care package with a get-well-soon balloon so large it barely fit through my door. But despite the progress, loneliness crept in during quiet evenings. I missed having someone to talk to about my day. missed cooking for more than just myself. Even missed the chaos of having a teenager around. I hadn't heard from Leo since that one text. I sent him messages every week. Nothing pushy, just letting him know I was thinking about him, sharing a funny dog video or asking about his baseball team. No responses. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "It's Leo. Can we talk?" My heart nearly stopped. I called immediately. "Hey," he said, his voice deeper than I remembered. Had it changed that much in just a few months, or had I forgotten? "Leo," I breathed. "It's so good to hear your voice." Silence. Then, "Dad doesn't know I'm calling you." "That's okay. How are you doing?" "Fine, I guess." The classic teenage response. Then, "Dad's girlfriend moved in." Penelope. Of course. "How do you feel about that?" I asked carefully. "She's okay, makes weird food, talks a lot about her chakras." I bit back a laugh. "And school? How's that going?" "It's whatever. Coach says I might start varsity next year." "That's amazing, Leo. I always said you had the best arm in the district." More silence. Then, Do you think I could come see Baxter sometime? I miss him." My throat tightened. "Of course, anytime. He misses you too." We arranged for him to come that Saturday. Mason would drop him off, thinking he was going to a friend's house. It wasn't ideal, sneaking around, but it was a start. Saturday arrived, and with it came a knock at my door. I opened it to find Leo standing there, taller than I remembered, hands shoved in his pockets. "Hey," he said, eyes on the floor. "Hey yourself," I replied, stepping aside to let him in. Baxter went absolutely wild, jumping and spinning and making those weird yodeling sounds he makes when he's overexcited. Leo dropped to his knees, burying his face in Baxter's fur. I pretended not to notice the tears. We spent the afternoon playing video games, ordering pizza, and talking about everything except Mason and Penelope. It felt normal. It felt like family. When it was time for him to leave, he hesitated at the door. "Can I come back, like maybe next weekend?" "Anytime," I said, meaning it. "This is your home too." He hugged me then, quick and awkward, but a hug nonetheless. After he left, I sat on my couch and cried for the first time since the hospital. Not from sadness, but from relief. I hadn't lost him after all. The next week brought another surprise. A text from Zachary, my nurse from the hospital. "Hope this isn't weird, but I saw you at PT today. Wanted to say hi, but you were focused, looking much better. Z." I smiled, remembering his kindness during those dark days. I texted back, "Not weird at all. Thanks for noticing the progress. Hard work pays off." We started texting regularly. Nothing flirtatious, just friendly check-ins. He'd ask about my recovery. I'd ask about his chaotic ER shifts. It was nice having someone who understood the medical side of what I was going through. One day, he asked if I wanted to grab coffee after my PT session. I hesitated. Was this a date? Was I ready for that? The divorce wasn't even final. "Just coffee," he clarified, as if reading my mind. "As friends, no pressure." Coffee turned into lunch. Lunch turned into weekly walks in the park as part of my recovery regimen, his words with air quotes. Walking turned into talking, real talking about hopes and disappointments and dreams.